But the very next day, you gave it away. This year, to save me from tears, I give it to someone special. Armageddon.
That's right, listeners. You've been whamageddon.
You've been whamageddoned on this Christmas day.
Not to be confused with Thunderstruck.
Right. No, you haven't been thunderstruck.
No, but you could go to Whamhalla now, where you could be thunderstruck.
For those of you who don't remember what that is, that's the first time you hear Last Christmas by Wham. So now you owe whoever hasn't heard it, you owe them a Coke. I don't know what you owe. Frosty beverage, as Megan would say.
Frosty beverage. Mm-hmm.
Although because it is winter, maybe you can, buy somebody like a hot toddy.
Yeah.
Something. I don't know. Yeah.
That might be preferred.
What is a hot toddy?
Some cocoa. Isn't it?
It's like some kind of, is it a bourbon thing? Something?
Yeah, I thought
it can be. It can
brandy?
be rum.
Mm.
Yeah. You can mix. I think you can mix with cider or other things. I don't know that it exclusively just has to be hot liquor.
Hot liquor.
Hot liquor.
You know what would go down really easy right now? Some hot liquor.
Oh my God.
Welcome to Spoiler Piece Theater, the podcast that doesn't give a shit about spoilers. We just want to talk about the movies. My name is Dave Riedel. I write sometimes for Salt Lake City Weekly, and I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
My name is Evan Crean. I am co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and co-author of your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living.
And my name is Megan Kearns. I'm a contributor to Edge Media Network, and I, too, am a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the last episode of 2020 of Spoiler Piece Theater. And I think we're going out with a bang today.
Woo-hoo!
Because we have 4 movies. 3 movies and a thing. We have 4 movies. We have Mank, which is, the Herman J. Mankiewicz movie. Soul, the new Pixar movie. Sylvie's Love, starring Tessa Thompson. And of course, Wonder Woman 1984. So without further ado, it would be adieu, actually, because adieu means goodbye, but without further ado, go ahead, Megan.
Sorry, I was going to say, and over on Patreon, we have our poll winner for the Christmas poll,
right.
too.
Right. Mm-hmm. Our poll winner this week was The Muppet Christmas Carol, in keeping with, this episode coming out on Christmas Day. So please, if you're a patron, go listen to that. And if you're not a patron, consider becoming one and go listen to that. Hey. So, anyway, we should go ahead and talk about Mank, which is a movie by David Fincher, written by his father, Jack Fincher, starring Gary Oldman as a guy who in real life was the same age as the main character, main character, but for some reason he's played by Gary Oldman and she's played by Amanda Seyfried, who's 30 years younger, and that's one of my first problems with the movie. But anyway, real quick. 1930s Hollywood is reevaluated through the eyes of scathing social critic and alcoholic screenwriter Herman J. Mankiewicz as he races to finish the screenplay of Citizen Kane. That's your 1-sentence logline in IMDb.
Mm-hmm.
Gang, what did we think of Mank?
Please don't make me watch it again.
Evan, you're always coming in clutch with the dad jokes.
Yeah, I hated it.
Oh, Mank was this hard to get through. In fact, I didn't get through it. So
I said via email to Megan and Dave that I suffered through it.
Yeah, you did.
Wow. So Megan and Evan, you both saw it, which I stopped after I looked at the time that I stopped, 49 minutes, which I feel like I gave it 10 minutes too many. But Evan, why did you hate it? And Megan, why did you think it was okay?
Megan, you can go first.
Oh, I was going to wait. I was waiting with bated breath for why you hated it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well.
Wow.
But I could start. I thought this was it's fine. Like, fine. I say that as I'm a big Fincher fan. Like, I really love his films. I mean, maybe not all of them all the time, but even the ones that I'm lesser on, I still enjoy, or I still appreciate their technical mastery. And this has beautiful cinematography. You know, I
Yes.
love that this is filmed in black and white, and that was partly why it took so long to get this filmed, or get this made. But aside from the cinematography and aside from Amanda Seyfried as Marion Davis, who I think her performance is incredible. I think she's really great in this. Yeah, it's very stylized, and it's clear that it's trying to immerse you in the Citizen Kane, you know, feel. Like, there are some shots that are, you know, that echo like the breaking of the snow globe scene, you know, as a bottle falls out of, you know, Mank's hands and things like that. And the score is, you know, evocative of it. And it's clearly trying to immerse you in that world. And yet it feels very slick, but there's something about it that feels very hollow and just kind of blasé for me. And I feel like this is a really interesting story, or could have been. Like, the real story is interesting. Yeah, and it just, okay, whatever.
Hollow is such a great word to describe this film. It just feels so empty and joyless and just, I don't know, rote. It which is weird to say, because I agree with you, Megan. The cinematography is really impressive, and the way that this film is shot and edited to look like an old Hollywood film is so impressive. But I just don't give a shit about anything happening in this long, fucking bloated movie. I don't care about the main character, Mank. He's a drunken asshole. Why? Like, it just boils down to the, you know, unlikable protagonist who's just, why do I want to watch 2 hours and 11 minutes of this fucking idiot? Why do I want to watch a movie that jumps around in time shittily?
Evan, I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say, you sound like me. Are you all right? I mean, ooh.
Also, like David Fincher movies, but this movie is just so uninteresting to me. And Citizen Kane is an amazing film, and I'm sure there could be an amazing movie that's about the making or the writing of Citizen Kane, but I just feel like there's nothing here to hold on to.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to jump in here and say that I got 49 minutes into Mank and then was like, nope. Because I've gotten to a point in my life where I'm like, if it ain't working after nearly an hour, it ain't working. Or at least for me. So, and I think I have to disagree with you two about the cinematography and the editing, because you know what this felt like to me? This felt like when Saturday Night Live does an old movie and it's in black and white, and they've, you know, like when they change the ending of It's a Wonderful Life and they show you the cut ending where they actually go and they beat the shit out of the old banker. That's what this movie felt like to me. It felt like Dana Carvey's going to walk in at any minute. Gary Oldman, when he goes into like character actor mode, which is kind of what he just does now, his performances get so mannered and so bogged down in the performance. To borrow Evan's phrase, they're joyless for me. And he just sucks the energy out of the room whenever he's on screen. And he's on screen, and what I saw in every scene.
Oh yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah.
And I agree that Amanda Seyfried's great. I think she's a really underrated performer. Generally speaking, it's always like, hey, Amanda Seyfried's in this movie. And the movie, maybe it's good, maybe it's not. But, you know, we don't think about how good she is. I also thought Lily Collins was good, what I saw of her.
Yeah, she's great in this.
But like, to Evan's point, who fucking cares about like Herman Mankiewicz trying to write Citizen Kane? Fuck this guy. I mean...
Yeah, he
and
just sits in a bed and drinks all day and is an asshole to the people who are there to help him, and he's an asshole to his wife and family.
Speaking of that, like it's really interesting hearing you guys talk about it and watching an unlikable protagonist, because I had some issues with the depiction of, alcoholism and kind of the enabling around it, and how the woman, Frida, the nurse, was like, oh, it's okay. I'm okay with his alcoholism and I'm going to enable it essentially because he got us all out of this town in Germany, which is a really benevolent thing. And that's awesome. And that's great. But it's also very it's a weird justification. And I couldn't help but think of, since we're talking about, or this is supposed to feel like an old film, and you're right, Dave, it does not feel like an old film, even though I still think the cinematography is beautiful. It doesn't feel like an old film, and it's supposed to, which is a weird disconnect. But I couldn't help but think of Ray Milland's beautiful performance, full of pathos, as an alcoholic in The Lost Weekend. And I'm like, okay, here's a guy who is doing the utmost shitty things, and but there's so much beauty, and you feel so sympathetic and bad for him. And here is, Gary Oldman playing, a character who's also struggling with alcoholism. And I'm like, I don't give a shit. Like, you're just, no, like, I'm just not on board.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like that this movie wants to have like a sense of whimsy to it, but David Fincher's the wrong fucking guy to do whimsy. Like, yes. David Fincher does The Social Network and Gone Girl and Alien 3 and Seven. That's what Zodiac. That's what he does well. And if there's humor in those movies, it's completely incidental. I mean, I know that people think that Fight Club is a comedy, but Jesus fucking Christ.
That is not a comedy. Not intentionally one. No.
Yeah. So like, I just, you need someone who frankly has a lighter touch. I mean, when you hear about how David Fincher works, like recently, June Raphael was on Mark Maron's podcast, and she was talking about how Zodiac was her first movie, and her first day she did 40 takes of a scene of her answering the phone. And it's like 40 takes answering the phone.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
That's what Charles Dance said about one of the scenes. I know you didn't get to it, Dave, but there's a scene at the end or near the end, where Mank is like, he breaks up a dinner party and he's like drunk and going on a tirade. And apparently that took like around 100 takes, maybe more.
Good Lord.
Yeah, like that's out of control.
This is one time I would agree with the Clint Eastwood method. Was like, okay, there's no hair in the gate. All the lights were in the right place. Nobody tripped over anything. Moving on.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Anyway, that's how I felt.
The one thing I will also say that I liked is I do like kind of speaking of that scene at the dinner party when Mank is talking about Don Quixote and a film he wants to make, and he's talking about how he wants to make Don Quixote a newspaperman, because he's clearly talking about William Randolph Hearst. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting to think about the parallels between Citizen Kane and Don Quixote, and how clearly this is, you could argue that that's what's happening, with Mankiewicz, is that he's kind of being like Don Quixote anyway. So I kind of thought that was kind of interesting, or could have been interesting. But again, it just feels like a good idea that isn't really implemented or really explored or executed or anything like that. So yeah.
Right. If this movie was delved more into the writing process, or more into how they came up with some of the ideas for the story of Citizen Kane, I feel like that would have been more interesting. But I'm just watching the writer dick around for 2 hours is...
Well, I mean, to be fair, he's clearly, the ideas in Citizen Kane he got from Marion Davis and from Hearst. So, and from Louis B. Mayer, clearly that's why they're showing all the flashbacks, is to show like that's what inspired him to write this, and a lot of that was rumored, in the making of, or after Citizen Kane came out and talking about it. But it is so hard to depict writing on screen and to make it look interesting.
God,
and it so rarely is done well. And so I get what, Fincher is going for, and I get what he's trying to do, but it just still doesn't quite work.
Yeah. Well, on that note.
Oh, one final thing that I will say. I did laugh occasionally at the occasional Yiddish joke. That was it. That was my only joy in the film, was the occasional laugh at a Yiddish joke.
Okay, I laughed at nothing. So, I mean, potato, I guess. Well, seems like Mank, not a lot of love for it. Evan, I will never Mank you watch that again.
Thank you.
So let's move on to Soul. which I don't know why I just said it that way. But Soul is the new Pixar movie starring Jamie Foxx and Tina Fey and Graham Norton and, oh man, Rachel House and Alice Braga and Felicia Rashad and Questlove and a lot of people, a lot of voices in this movie. And your log line is that piano player guy who's a middle school teacher, I guess you would say he's a failed jazz artist. He gets the gig of a lifetime, and while he's going home to celebrate getting the gig of a lifetime and get his suit, he falls in a manhole and dies and spends the rest of the movie trying to get back at his body to get to the gig. There it is. And he ends up in a cat at one point.
For quite a bit of the film.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should probably say that a good chunk of the plot of this film is dedicated to this afterlife that he finds himself in, where he meets Tina Fey, who is like a soul that's waiting to be born, basically. And her soul has refused to move to Earth or has not been able to, despite having thousands of people mentor her in the afterlife. And so he just becomes the latest in a long line of people. And so the film also becomes about, can he get her to find what they call in the film her spark, or whatever it is that will complete her personality so she's ready to go live on Earth. And so it's like finding that, and then also convincing her that she should go live life and not just stay in this stasis that she lives in.
Wow, that was surprisingly accurate and deep. Okay. So Soul, I thought, was fine. It's one of those Pixar movies that's like, you can see what it's trying to do and it doesn't hit the mark. It gets close a few times, but it's not, I don't know what it is. It's just like Pixar movies. It's gotten to a point where you expect them to be fucking awesome, even though there is the Cars series. Let's not even get into that.
Yeah,
shit.
or The Good Dinosaur.
Yeah, or Monsters University. Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah,
but
they have their whiffs too. But yeah, this movie is such a mixed bag, and there's points where it really works. Like, I think there are periods of the film that are really just, I think I described it in Letterboxd as some beautiful harmonies with some derivative riffs in improvisation.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It really, there's points where it's really working, and every time I found myself really enjoying it and really into the story, it would do something to just completely knock me out and go back to doing the thing that I hated.
And for me, the thing that like was really strange about it is I found myself, usually when you have a movie like this, which has very separate parts, you've got they're living human beings. You've got this afterlife thing that they're in. You've got the whimsical part of the afterlife. You would think that one of those things would work all the time, but I found like pieces of them working at some times, and other times being like, well, wait, why are we back here now? I don't need this explanation anymore. You've already told me what happens. One thing I did appreciate, though, is the joke on every time like a soul, they're not sure where it is, they cut really quick to show you where it is. And so when the cat is going up the escalator, that was really funny to me. But anyway, yeah, I found this to be all over the place, which I think is part of the point, but also, how about you, Megan?
So I thought this was wonderful. So I didn't have issues with it the way you guys did. I mean, yes, it is a little scattered at times, but I just kind of completely like absorbed that and thought it was fine. I mean, I couldn't help but compare the depiction of the afterlife as in like Defending Your Life or The Good Place, which, both of those, the film and the TV show, do that so well and so beautifully. And they're so like well thought out, and they're like puzzle pieces where everything, especially The Good Place, where everything just comes together perfectly. And this does not do that. Like, not everything comes together in a really logical puzzle piece kind of way. However, there was so much emotional resonance for me with this film that I was fine with things that weren't quite perfect or didn't quite work. And I really, really loved the relationship that formed between Joe and 22, the unborn soul. And I really found it interesting. How do you for lack of a better word, overcome apathy and find the joy and the beauty in life. And how do you find that? And where do you find that? And, and the whole notion of exploring what your purpose is and how it's, and Joe is so fixated on his one shot, his big break, in music, and how he thinks that's his purpose. And he's so convinced of that. And then one of the mentors later in the film tells him, like, that's not your purpose. That's not what your purpose is about. It's not related to your job or, your career or your goals or in that way. And it's just, there's just something really beautiful in that message. And I mean, I was just an emotional wreck. Like, I loved when, 22 has finally decided that, she's going to be born and she's excited. And he's like, I'll travel with you. And she's like, but you can't. And he's like, I'll go as far as I can. And I was a weeping mess. I was crying all over the place. And I really just love that. Something else that I really love about this film is that he's so convinced that teaching is not for him, that teaching is just, kind of a way station on the way to his big break. But then when he does do the performance and he's so excited about it, and then afterwards he talks to the singer voiced by Angela Bassett, and he's like, okay, what's next? And she's like, we do it all over again tomorrow. And he's like, oh, and he gets what he wants. But he doesn't really want that. He doesn't realize that is what being an artist is about, is a lot of monotony, a lot of doing the same shit over and over and over and over again. And you got to embrace that and you got to love that. And if you don't, maybe that's not quite for you. And I think that's so fascinating because so many films would just stop at oh, you got the big break. That's it. That's your fulfillment. That's your dream. That's your wish fulfilled. And this film doesn't do that. And it's like, what does happen if you get your wish fulfilled, your dream achieved? And it turns out it's not quite what you thought it was or not quite what you want. And I just think that's really interesting in the way it explores that. So for me, this really worked. And the music. I know we haven't even talked about the music, but the music is great.
The music is wonderful. The music is truly from start to finish. The music in this, which I think is by Atticus, what's his face, and Trent Reznor, right?
Yep. Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, this is, I always like their scores, but I mean, they do all different kinds of genres and all kinds of things. And everything is just, all of the music is perfect in this movie. Unfortunately, the story I felt was a little derivative, but
yeah, I feel like I have two kind of major beefs with the story. One, I think, is a problem of representation. Like, this is, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is the first Pixar film with a black character as its lead.
Is. Which is ridiculous that it took this long.
Yeah. First of all, it's ridiculous. But also, I found it problematic that we didn't get to spend a lot of time with this character as himself. We spent a lot of time with him in the afterlife and a lot of time with him as a cat. But I really wanted to spend more time in his world. You know what I mean? Like the barbershop scene, I think, was one of the most effective scenes in the film because we saw this character in his natural habitat and we saw him interacting with the people in his life. And I just thought, I want more of this. I want to see more of where this character lives and the people that are in his world. And so it frustrated me how often we were not doing that. And we were focused, for lack of a better explanation, on Tina Fey, who is not a white character in the film, but in my mind, I'm like, we're off doing this other story when I feel like I really want to focus on who this guy is.
It's funny that you say that, though, that she's not a white character, but she actually, arguably she is, not just because she's voiced by Tina Fey, but she says that when she says, like, I chose a middle-aged white woman's voice because it's the most annoying. So she is coded as white, even if she's arguably not, because she's an unborn soul. So I agree with you. And it's kind of the Princess and the Frog thing, that it's like, yay, we finally get a black Disney princess. Oh, but she's going to be a frog for like 90% of the film. Great.
Right. Yeah, and I thank you for reminding me about this because I forgot that line of dialogue. So yeah, I think that's one of my major beefs with the story is that I would have liked to just see this character in his world. And I understand that afterlife could play into it, but I just feel so weird how much of the time we spend not with him and where he lives and what he's doing. And like the barbershop scene was really effective. The scene with his mom where he finally has a heart to heart with her about his career. So effective. We'll love to see a movie where most of it was taking place in regular life. Second thing, that I feel like really irked me is I feel like the moral of the movie, like the movie is really hard on Joe for being so obsessed with his career. And I understand that like the end is kind of like, well, you just need to appreciate life more and you need to just enjoy living and just kind of revel in that and not be so obsessed with like goals and success. But I don't know, is it really that horrible to like have a dream and chase a dream and like try to do everything that you can to accomplish that dream and feel like it's your purpose? I don't know.
No, it's not at all. I just got something a little bit different. I thought it was not so much that the problem is that he's so focused and dedicated to his goal or has this dream, but it's more that he did so kind of so single-mindedly that he didn't have anything else going on in his life, which arguably is a problem, not for everyone, but it could be. So, but no, you're right though, that's being dedicated and career driven. That's absolutely not a problem or should not be treated as such.
You know what is interesting about this conversation you guys are having?
Ooh, what?
I agree with both of you.
Yay!
Wow. I mean, awesome. I can see both your points of view completely. I mean, you're both wrong, but
oh,
I'm just kidding.
You
give and you take away.
I know, that's what I do. This is going to sound really, really morose, I think, but I think that a whole lot of soul could have been redeemed for me if he hadn't made it at the end, if he had blown everything and she gets to go and be born and be a person, but he's not. And I know that's not really what Disney movies do, but I mean, would have earned its PG rating as far as I was concerned. So, yeah, I do have to mention though that the bit when he's first in the cat's body and he thinks he's talking, but then it cuts to what other people are hearing and it's just a cat screaming at them is one of the funniest things I've seen in my life. And even though that joke has been done in other movies, like where you get into some of the, oh my God, it was so great because the cat's voice, whoever voiced that cat, Academy Award nominee. So
I wonder if it was Alan Tudyk.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe
it was the rooster in Moana.
And I also wanted to single out Rachel House for playing Terry. I loved that character. Loved. So Terry was the one who counted the souls.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you. I was like, who's Terry?
Yeah, I mean, everything, just the quiet Kiwiness of it all and just the sinister sort of kind of stuff. Oh, I loved it. I was also happy to hear Wes Studi's voice in there for a hot second.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I kind of come down. I don't think that I had as much difficulty with it as you did, Evan, but I also didn't love it the way you did, Megan. So I think I'm somewhere in the middle. So yeah, there you go.
All right. That's pretty cool. We had a range of experiences.
I think it is. Does anybody want to have a final thought on Soul before we move on?
No.
That sounds like a no.
No, I think we covered it.
Okay, well then let's move on to Sylvie's Love.
Yes. Let's move on.
Sylvie's Love, which it's an unfortunate name for a movie. Even, and I'm just going to go ahead and say this right off the top. I fucking loved every moment of this movie. But
yes,
the title I did not love, but I'm not really sure what else you would call it. So anyway, here's your one sentence log line from IMDb. A woman working at her father's record store in Harlem in the late 1950s meets an aspiring saxophone player. And while that's true, there's so much more to it than that.
So much more.
Years-long romance.
Yeah. And just this is one of those stories where you feel like it's like the Three's Company problem, right? You think like if you just said what was on your mind, there would be no confusion. But for some reason, if they just said what was on their minds in this movie, it would have taken away the power of all of the gestures they made for each other, etc.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
All the sacrifice, all of the love. It's so good.
These are people who like truly sacrifice their own dreams for each other because they're so in love. And it's like one of those things where you're like, I'm sure that was hard for you guys to live through, but god damn, do you two love each other?
Yeah.
Anyway, let's talk about the story a little bit, because it's more than, they fall in love. It's like, yes, they do fall in love. He's the tenor sax player who I don't really believe that he's going to be the next John Coltrane based on what we hear him play in the movie, but then whatever. He goes to work in her father's store because he's into her. Like, not because he really wants a job in a record store. He's like, who's this woman who works in the record store? I'm going to fucking work here.
But he also is the kind of guy who would have a day job. He's said in the story that he's worked previous day jobs to make ends meet. He's not above it. He's not one of those guys who will go broke just, you know, for the sake of dedication to his art.
And she's engaged to someone that we meet later in the movie, but they fall in love. Tessa Thompson, and I don't know how to pronounce the actor's name, but I will say he's married to Kerry Washington, and he's a former football player. That's our lead.
It's Nnamdi Asomugha.
Thank you. And he is quite fine in his role too. He plays Robert.
They have a magnetic chemistry and such a great relationship. Like, I could have just watched them like dance and like gaze into each other's eyes and talk for hours and hours and hours. It was wonderful.
Yeah. And one of the things I wanted to say is, we talk about how great Tessa Thompson is because she is, but I think what people don't really talk about is just like how magnetic, like she's a movie star. She's got that thing, Like, and even like there are movie stars who don't have that thing, but she's got it. And I could just watch her, just watch I Love Lucy, which she does a lot in this movie.
Right. Yeah.
She does.
Yeah. And her big dream is to be a television producer. And I guess it's not giving away anything because it is spoiler piece that she and Robert do get together, and she does wind up pregnant. And I was actually, when that first happened, I was like, I don't like the way this story's turning. But then she doesn't tell him, and she lets him go off and become a big, successful jazz musician while she marries her fiance, and he raises the daughter as his own. And then Robert and Sylvie bump into each other again.
When her cousin stands her up, she's waiting outside to see a performance, and then he's walking by in the street.
And then they go to see the performance, and then things happen in the boudoir. And then
boy, do they happen.
Yes. And at this point, she's, working, Sylvia's working for a television producer, like the first Black television producer at this network. And she's producing a cooking show, which is hosted by Wendy McLevin-Covey, which is just hilarious in and of itself.
Yeah.
And then Tessa Thompson becomes the producer when her boss quits to get married, and Robert, there's so like Robert learns the girl is his, and the husband leaves, and then they're gonna go to Detroit, and then boo, and Robert like gives up being with her because he doesn't want to like make her. Robert has an opportunity, he thinks, to go be like a staff sax player for Motown, which in the early 60s, that would have been a fucking great gig. Like, how many awesome records would you have been on, But he turns out he's not going to get the gig, and she's all prepared to move with him to Detroit and give up her job as like the second Black television producer at this network and go start all over again in Detroit. Instead of letting her do that, he's like, nah, I don't want you there. And you're just like, no. But of course, it all does work out in the end. She bumps into a mutual friend of theirs, and finds out that, oh no, he's working at an auto plant in Detroit. He's not working for Motown. So she goes to Motown. She's like, you sacrificed so much for me. I love you. We're stuck together. Yay!
But goddamn, do they earn that happy ending?
They really do.
Yeah. I also love that the film starts in the middle of their love story. Like, it opens with them reconnecting and bumping into each other outside of the concert, and then we go back in time and to when they meet. I just love that. And I love this film so much, and I love the performances. They're wonderful. I also love that I felt like I was watching a film in the late 50s, early 60s. This is such a loving throwback to classic films. And I love that in the best possible way. And I love seeing Black love on screen because we need more love stories on screen. And I love that it's a Black period piece. And And the music's amazing. And I love that we're exploring feminism. And it is just so good.
Yeah.
It's a delight. I loved it so much. And I love that she's so determined in her career. And I love not only that she echoes, not only does Sylvie echo what Bobby, I think that's his name, says that, life is too short to waste time doing, things that you don't absolutely love, when she finally realizes that she doesn't want to be with her husband anymore because, he married her when she was pregnant and, she thought that was so nice. So she tried to make it work. And I also love the line that she says, like, I can't be the woman of your dreams while I'm trying to be, the woman of mine. And I was like, yes, that's right. You be the woman of your dreams and you go after your career and, get your, love and happy ending too. And this is just wonderful.
Evan, how do you feel?
So I'm going to be honest. I was not digging this movie for maybe about the first 30 to 40 minutes, but I grew to really like this movie by the end. Something about the way that the first kind of act or so played out to me was just kind of slow and tedious. But once I felt like the story kicked into gear and we knew a lot more about, Sylvie's dreams, and when she starts working for the television producer and it starts climbing the ladder there and gets, really involved in her career and Robert comes back. And something about that part in the movie got me invested. And then the way that their relationship develops and the challenges that it faces, I think were really compelling. And thankfully they end up together at the end, and it is a happy ending, which as we were getting into the last, I want to say 20 minutes or so, I was not sure where the film was going to wrap up. And I was nervous that it was going to be the kind of situation where he was just going to leave and say, I can't ask her to give up the stuff, so I'm just going to leave her.
Yeah. Which is what it looks like is going to happen.
Yeah.
Until
literally the last like 5 minutes. The movie comes to a very rapid conclusion.
Yeah.
It's a real nail biter.
If that's my one complaint with it, is that the ending, when it does happen, it's just like, it's over. And you're like, what? But that's what we've been working toward, is them to get together. That's the whole thing. So one of the things I wanted to mention, though, and I think that movies don't, like, most of the times when we watch movies that are about romance, it's like the beginning of the romance. And then, like every romantic comedy like ends up with them together, but they really don't know each other very well. Whereas this movie gets into the things that you do for your partner that seem probably insane to other people. Like, she's got a great job. She's producing like a really popular show, and she has made it even more popular by letting the host be herself even more and tell kind of off-color jokes and be silly. And so it's a big success. And she's like, no, I'll go to Detroit and start over because I love you so much. And you're like, and people do that shit. And you think to yourself, you're insane. You're insane to give up your career as like an anchor person at this network and move to New Zealand so your husband can start a startup. That's nuts. But people do that shit, and I appreciated that it delved into that. And it doesn't seem like she's taking a step away from feminism or anything. It's just like, no, I'm making a conscious choice because I love this man and I want to be with him.
Yeah. Well, I think that's also represented in the different situations when she's with her husband earlier in the film, and he's telling her, basically, if your job is getting in the way of your responsibilities at home, you need to walk away from your job. And he schedules this vacation to Disney, and he says, okay, well, in 2 weeks we're going. And she's, I can't take that time off of work. And he's like, oh, well, we'll talk about it. And he's so clearly agitated. And I feel like the way that Robert approaches it is so different, that there's space for her to make that decision on her own and to want to make that sacrifice for Robert, as opposed to just her husband just dictating to her what is going to happen.
Yeah. Well, it's so clear that Bobby is so supportive of Sylvie and her career. Like he knew right from the start, talking to her dad, played by the always amazing and wonderful Lance Reddick.
Lance Reddick. So great.
He is so fantastic, and he's great here. And so he witnessed, her dream and her wanting to do this, and now he's seeing it. And the fact that he says, I just always wanted you to be happy, even if I wasn't in your life, even if that meant I couldn't be in your life. And I was like, oh my God, that's like the most beautiful, loving sentiment. And that really is, true love, is that you're willing to, sacrifice, and you're willing to put your partner's happiness above your own. And, you want the best for them. And they really do bring out the best in each other and are so supportive of their careers and their dreams. And it's just refreshing to see, and just really, really lovely.
Yeah. Although I do have to say, Sting said this all in 4.5 minutes. If you love somebody, set them free. Like 35 years ago. So, I mean, are they really breaking new ground here? I don't know.
Fair.
Yeah.
I also just have to say that this has gorgeous costuming and gorgeous production design and cinematography. And this was just such a visual treat. I loved watching this, not just for the performances and not just for the wonderful story. And I also wanted to say, back to your point, Dave, about the ending, how it ends abruptly. It does, but I think that was a very intentional choice, not just because, they're finally together, we're going to end, but also because, again, that feels so much like an older Hollywood film.
Yeah.
Where films would just kind of like, we're gonna kiss, we're together, and it's over.
Yeah.
Like really quick.
Yeah. I hadn't really thought about it, but that's totally, I agree with you. Yeah.
Thanks.
Always thinking about the things that I don't think about. Well. Oh, well. Well, so yeah, I cannot recommend. I mean, now I have to put in the caveat. If you're not a person who's into romance or people relating to each other as people in movies, then this is probably not the movie for you. But if you have a soul
and you like good movies,
and not just soul in the way that the last movie we were talking about was called Soul, then this is the movie for you. So
I just can't. Oh God, I love this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't, and this is, I kind of knew I was like, this movie is sort of up my alley, but when I was watching it, I was actually sitting there going like, God, I can't believe how much I like this movie.
Same.
I felt that way after Act 1.
Yeah.
Yay! We're glad you finally came around.
Right. Wow. Well, okay. But also, let's move on to another period film. Wonder Woman, 1984.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of, the 1984 in it seems superfluous to me just because it's so clearly the mid 80s. Well, okay. So Wonder Woman 1984, one sentence logline from IMDb. Rewind to the 1980s as Wonder Woman's next big screen adventure finds her facing two all new foes, Max Lord and the Cheetah. True. Both of those things true. Not really a great summary of all of the things happening.
Are they ever?
Yeah, I mean, but that's especially slight. I mean, it's slight the way Sylvie's love was slight, Because a lot happens in this movie. I think a lot more happens in this movie than your average superhero movie. And it also feels very different from your average superhero movie. And when I say average, I mean anything in the DC canon or the Marvel canon. And I don't mean average like they're just average. I just mean there's a fucking bunch of them to pick from that you could be like, oh, this is different from Winter Soldier or Batman versus Superman or whatever.
I liked it, but I had some problems with it.
Megan?
I thought this was awful. I thought this was an absolute mess. And
it's pretty messy.
I was so disappointed because I absolutely love the first one. Even though there's some issues in the third act, I love it. So I was so excited to see this. And I was so annoyed, and it's convoluted, and a lot of it does not make logical sense.
That's true.
That is true.
We'll get into it more, but I have a problem with the fact of it being in the 80s. And I have a lot of problems with this film. A lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
This is one of those, I mean, it has to be set in a time period if you're going to write the same story that there are nuclear weapons and there are blah, blah, blah. But the 80s choice seemed very strange to me just because it could have been the 70s. It could have been the 60s. It could have been 1994.
I will say that I think the villain felt appropriate for the 80s, even if the writing of the villain and it was flawed and like not a lot of stuff made sense about him. I think it is absolutely appropriate to have a 1980s villain who's like, more, give me more. I need to do everything more and bigger and better, just because bigger and better and more, not necessarily because there's any. Like, he literally was bringing about the end of the world just because he just couldn't get enough.
Well, basically, it's Donald Trump, except in a comic book movie, you know?
Mhm.
Kind of like Donald Trump meets Gordon Gekko.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I also, I did have lots of problems with it too. One of which being like, it didn't make a lot of sense. But I did appreciate that they sort of, to me anyway, seemed to learn a lesson from the third act debacle of the first Wonder Woman movie. And they were like, this is actually a lot different. There's not a big, huge battle scene that ends the whole movie. It's literally Diana saying, you've got a choice to make. You can bring about the end of the world, or you can renounce your wish and save yourself and humanity and, you know, win back your son's love. Which I sort of, I just appreciated that after the whole like overblown, because the first Wonder Woman movie, I was just loving it so much until we get to the end and we're like, okay, first of all, I knew you were the bad guy. And second of all, now we're just going to watch you two throw things at each other. You know, they didn't do that in this one. They did that in the middle with the cheetah, but who was played by Kristen Wiig. And I would say, I have a feeling I'm going to get some pushback on this from certain people on the show, but I thought was quite effective, Kristen Wiig's performance.
Yeah, I liked Kristen Wiig.
It's fine.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, it's fine.
I think she would have been a more compelling villain overall. I think that could have been interesting.
Yeah. Well, I liked the idea that they find this stone, they don't know what it is, and they don't realize that when they hold it and they make a wish, they make a wish. I thought that the wish will be granted. I thought that was really compelling. When the main villain, Max Lord, is just like, I wish to be the stone, I was kind of like,
What?
What?
I was also confused about that and how it even worked in the first place. It's like he could grant someone else's, he would like hold hands with someone and have them make a wish, but then he would take whatever it is he wanted from them. But it wasn't clear to me if like the magic dictated that he just got whatever he wanted, or that person was actually acquiescing to him.
Right.
No, it was that he was getting the thing that mattered most to them. So he wasn't mandating or dictating what he got. It was as soon as they did their wish, they were giving up, not knowing they were giving it up. They were giving up the thing that mattered most to them. And then he was getting that or absorbing that. Yeah, but it's really unclear. And I didn't actually figure that out until like the end. And because like, I was like, wait, what? Yeah. And I have to say the thing that really pissed me off and annoyed me about the Dreamstone and about the whole thing of it is that, okay, Diana is an immortal goddess who is a cultural anthropologist and has been living for like centuries. And, you know, Cheetah, Barbara, Kristen Wiig, is, you know, a gemologist and, you know, works in the archaeology field as well. And neither of them know about this, but this goofball over here, and by the way, I love Pedro Pascal, not in this role, but I do love him normally. But this goofball over here has been like saving some clips randomly and knows all about this Dreamstone. Like, what the fuck?
For sure.
Like, it makes no sense that he would not only know about this when the two of them who are, you know, revered in their field, you know, don't know about it, have never heard of it, but this guy does?
Yeah.
No, it's ridiculous.
You are absolutely right. That was one of the things, like when they go to his office and Chris Pine, who shows up, it kind of makes sense why he shows up, but it doesn't really make sense why she knows that it's Chris Pine, but okay.
Says the thing that he said and he hands her his watch. That's how she knows.
I mean, it could have been fucking anybody. I mean, honestly, it could have been me, for Christ's sake.
Right. It's a weird choice to put him in another body, but then just show Chris Pine. It's fucking weird ass choices in this movie.
Agreed.
But when they're in Max Lord's office and Chris Pine is picking up like the mimeographs, he's like, oh, he's been looking for this for a long time. I had that thought too, Megan, where I was just like, why doesn't she know what this is? Not only has she lived pretty much forever, she's like a genius. Why wouldn't she have heard of this? She knows who all the gods are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, like she lived with some of them. So, I mean, yeah.
Yeah. It was just,
But one of the things that made me like, and you guys are going to think I'm so lame. One of the reasons I liked this movie is because of the relationship that Max had with his kid. And the moment that the kid came into it, and I knew, I'm like, all right, even DC won't kill a kid, which they didn't. I was just like, this is going to be like about him realizing, that his kid just loves him because he's his dad. And I was just fucking in tears during that last speech when Max Lord is like, I'm so sorry, I'm a loser, I'm blah, blah, blah. And even though it's right on the nose and the kid says, I don't care about any of that. I love you anyway, whatever. I was just like, because here's the thing. When you have like kids and they're that young, although his kid is older than my oldest, your kids just think you're the fucking greatest. And they don't know why they think that. They just do. And you, of course, have the knowledge that you're flawed, that you're a piece of shit in some ways, that you've done so many dumb things in your life. And you're worried that they just know that, even though they have no reason to know that, And so I just found that to be a rather genuine moment in an otherwise very strange, tonally all over the place action movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see what you mean, Dave. I think emotionally that moment feels real, but I think the build up to some of that is strange. Like, we're supposed to now suddenly be sympathetic to him as a villain because he was poor and kids made fun of him and his dad was abusive, which we find out while he's destroying the world. And then like after he's destroyed the world because he hugs his son, it's okay. Like, we're not going to throw him in jail because he basically almost brought about the end of the world.
I didn't say it was okay. I just said I bought where he was coming from,
Just that it moved you. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's been done so much better in other villains. Like, one that came to mind watching it, was Kingpin in the Daredevil series, and how very similar, like had like a really shitty upbringing, really shitty background, and he thinks he's doing the right thing. But that's the thing, this villain doesn't think he's doing the right thing. He's just, greedy. And yeah, so it does feel really strange, to have this kind of like all of a sudden turnabout, like, oh yeah, I'm not a shitty dad. Oh yeah, I do care about my kid. Like, it feels so weird. And I want to go back and talk about the 80s setting for a minute and why it bothered me so much. So I was so excited for it to be set in the 80s. The posters that have come out, the screenshots we've seen, I'm like, it looks gorgeous. I love the colors, the design. I'm like, oh, this is going to embrace the 80s and the weirdness of the 80s and the ostentatiousness. I'm here for it. And yet when we get in there, it feels more like it's making fun of the 80s. It doesn't feel like it's really embracing the 80s. Certain things are very subdued. And whenever something's set as a period piece, you don't always have to ask this, but you kind of wonder like, oh, why? Why did you pick this period? Why did you choose this? And it feels like it's just kind of random. And like, yes, they are exploring, or they talk about, the Cold War, and we see some protesters with no nuke signs, but to me, it didn't really feel like it was organically kind of woven in. And I couldn't help but think of like Stranger Things and how that's in the 80s. And it's not just like, oh, hey, we're going to set a show in the 80s. It makes sense because like those kids are on bikes and they can't phone, their parents. And that's a very 80s thing. And then it's also a nod, to horror films and to sci-fi, in the 80s. And like, this just didn't feel like that. It didn't feel like, oh, we're going to do a throwback to the 80s and here's why, and we're going to explore, the fear around nuclear weapons. And to me, it's such a missed opportunity. There's so many missed opportunities. It's really frustrating.
Yeah, I think you're right about all that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Agreed so hard. I mean, as you can imagine, someone who wrote a book about 80s movies,
you did.
I was also quite excited for this to take place in the 80s. And similarly, I felt kind of let down because it commits to this really weird aesthetic that's kind of like a McDonaldized version of the 80s.
Yes.
That's like the best way I could describe it. Or like if someone tried to make a Dick Tracy version of the 1980s, that's kind of what this all feels like.
Well, what I kind of felt like about it, it was like it was trying to cram all of the 80s into 1984. The leg warmers, like that's the first thing you see when you go to the 80s is the leg warmers. And it's like, okay, the leg warmers, I don't remember if that was 1984, but I do remember it was a very short and specific time. So you've really got to like, you can't just throw in leg warmers and be like the 80s. I mean, it was like, it's so much more.
There's so much more there. And I think a recent example of it's not a movie, it's a TV show, but American Horror Story 1984, I think, is a great example of setting something in the 80s, not just for the sake of it being in the 80s, but really playing up on important themes of the 80s. And it feels like it feels like a much sharper commentary on the time that it takes place in than this movie does. It's such a sharp contrast from this movie.
Yeah, definitely. But I want to say, because I haven't said anything positive about this movie, I will say I do still love Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. I think she's got a real charisma to her, and I still like seeing her in this role. And even though I'm kind of annoyed that Chris Pine came back. He's very charming and he's great as Steve. So those are the good things. And I also think, Dave, that you're right that Kristen Wiig is good. I'm so annoyed that Diana for 40 years has not found a single friend. Like, really? Like, we're really supposed to believe that she's like all alone and like hasn't found anybody. And then she's pining for Steve. And then that's all she wants. And I'm like, wait a minute. What about her mission to, help humanity and save the world? And what about, her Amazonian sisters? And like, I don't know.
It seems like a missed opportunity. It's really strange. Like, the other movie came out, 3 years ago now? And it's like 3 years, this day and age is not a long time between sequels. But like, if this were, the late 70s or the early 80s and you were doing sequels, like 3 years is a fucking eternity back then. So like, think about everything that George Lucas did between Star Wars and Empire, and how like Empire is the best movie in that series, right? And it's just like, you guys have had a lot of time to think about this. And I know you have considerations and you have to work in the other DC bullshit, which thankfully they avoid a lot of in this. But it's like, you have an opportunity to almost make this work as a standalone. And it just doesn't, which is a bummer, because some of this I really like to watch. Kristen Wiig's change from mild-mannered whatever PhD to evil cheetah. It's like, I can, whole, absolute power corrupts absolutely, fine. But between her performance and the way it takes place over the entire movie, I would have liked to have seen more of her, because I think she was a better villain than Max Lord. But,
she definitely was.
But like,
yes,
very Catwoman-esque.
Yeah, but it was really cool to see someone like Kristen Wiig play that part, because it's like, why wouldn't someone like Kristen Wiig become evil
when she had a taste of power? Yeah, yeah. Similarly, I feel like I've been trashing the movie and I haven't said much positive about it. I think the opening scene is quite compelling. The whole relay race.
Yes.
Young Diana running in this crazy, insane relay. It's kind of like the most intense obstacle relay I've ever seen.
Yes. Yeah. Another thing I will also say is the cinematography is quite good. Same cinematographer as the first Wonder Woman. I'll say it's good here too. Yeah. I do love when she's lassoing in like inside the White House, and just some of the shots and just the way she's sliding on the ground. Yeah, I'm here for it. But I cannot get over that my favorite female superhero is still pining over a man. I'm sorry. And what's frustrating about that?
It's a bummer.
What's frustrating about it is it could have been a really interesting opportunity to show how hard it is to move on from grief. And yet it just doesn't feel that way. Instead, it just feels like it's this weird, like retro throwback to where like a woman needs a man and can't stand on her own. And so it just feels weird. And so maybe if there was better writing, more, complex character development, things like that, then maybe, it would have made more sense.
Yeah.
Been more impactful.
I didn't love that Steve came back just because I don't like that kind of shit. But I didn't take away from it the like, oh, she's pining up. I mean, she was. But
she's Chris pining for him.
She's Chris pining for him. I was actually thinking that, and then you got it first. I mean, I think you could make the argument that their relationship was strong enough in the first, and then why not? Why is she, she's, think about it in terms of like, you take a macro look at it, like she's blessed and or cursed, depending on your point of view, to basically live forever and have everyone close to her die. So why not have that? It's like, maybe over those centuries, he was the one true love. There's a way that it's better, like, take a page from Sylvie's love. Okay, everybody, just, go look at that and then rewrite Wonder Woman 1984. The thing that bothered me most, and I don't know if this is a quibble or if it's like the fucking root of all evil. Ronald Reagan was president in 1984, and this guy isn't Reagan. They don't say that he's Reagan. Doesn't look like him, doesn't sound like him, doesn't act like him. I mean, just like, it really made me angry. Like, here's the thing. You don't have to ask Ronald Reagan's family's permission, his estate's permission, to portray him in a movie because he is a historical figure. You've gone to the trouble to lampoon the 80s in all the other ways, and you're not going to lampoon the most easily lampoonable person who ever lived in that decade? Come on. And also, you could play up the fact that he was, in fact, an evil fuck who nearly... I mean, this is a guy who denied that AIDS was even a thing until like 6 months before he left office. So, like, go ahead and make fun of Reagan. He's not a saint. He was an old fucker. Old doesn't really have anything to do with it, but he was old at the time. Yeah.
Wasted opportunities. But like you, Megan, I also enjoy Gal Gadot as a performer. She has a lot of charisma, and I enjoy seeing her as Wonder Woman. And I liked some of the action set pieces in the movie, like the Raiders style truck chase sequence. I thought was also compelling when that truck was flipping over and she launched herself out into the air from underneath it. I thought that was incredible.
That was incredible.
Yeah. I also think that the way she caught those kids on that highway with the rope, she probably would have killed them based on the speed, but
that's whatever. What I thought too.
Yeah, it's kind of like when Superman catches Lois Lane when she falls off the building in the 1978 Superman. It's like, that she just would be a big pile of mush in your hands right now, right? Okay. Whatever.
I will say something else that I really like. I waiting to see it, and I love that we see this amazing gold Valkyrie-esque armor. That's incredible. I also want to say that we see the invisible jet. Not quite the way I thought we were going to see it, but still, I'm glad we see it. And the mid-credit scene.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. I actually was crying during that because, and we're going to spoil this, it's Spoiler Piece Theater. Linda Carter was one of my idols growing up as a kid as Wonder Woman. I used to act out scenes alongside the TV show Wonder Woman, and seeing her on screen, it was perfection.
It was cool. It's funny, when I was watching this and, you see her eyes when she's inside the suit. Joan was like, oh my God, it's Linda Carter. And I was like, yeah, it's not Linda Carter. And then when she shows up in the car, I was like, oh, it was her. Good call.
Good job, Joan.
Yeah. Anyway, all right. Well, gang, let's do a little recap of the old movies this week. So, Mank, I think we're all going to say, Megan, maybe you're going to say like, see it, don't see it, whatever. But
it's fine. See it or don't.
Yeah, Evan and I would pass on that shit. And if you were not going to pass on it, which would be your mistake, you can see it on Netflix. Soul, which we seem to kind of be in the middle on, all of us, except, wait, who loved Soul? I can't remember.
I said I definitely would recommend it, and I would say you should see it. But that's
okay. That's on Disney Plus. Sylvie's Love is, I think, in theaters. It's also on demand. Amazon. Thank you. It's on Amazon. And then Wonder Woman 1984 is on Disney Plus.
Oh, HBO Max, actually.
But wait, would we say see? We definitely, I think, all say see Sylvie's Love. But would we say see Wonder Woman?
If you're a completist, I guess
I would say see it. Like I said, I liked it, but I had some serious problems with it, as you listeners have heard. So take that into consideration.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend this, but at the same time, I even if somebody didn't recommend it to me, I was going to go see it. Like, and by going, I mean like going to my living room.
Yeah, go to your living room. Skip the COVID. Go to your living room. So anyway, that's this week's Christmas episode of Spoiler Poos Theater. Thank you, everybody, for sticking with us through another year. We'll see you next year. We really will see you next year. That's so weird. You know how like There's always a teacher who makes that joke, see you next year. And you're like, hey, fuck you, Mr. B. But yeah, we'll see you next year. So anyway, one of the first things I would like to do, though, is say thank you, Otto Clamor, our wonderful editor, for editing the show and taking it out of our hands and making life much easier for us. Thank you very much. And
thank you, Otto.
Yeah, you can find Spoiler Piece Theater anywhere you get podcasts. So just wherever you get podcasts, that's where you can find Spoiler Piece. You can also go to our website, spoilerpiece.com. If you want to follow us on the social medias, we are Spoiler Piece Theater on Facebook. We're at Spoiler Piece on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. If you wanted to get in touch with us, you could send us an email to spoilerpiece@gmail.com. Tell us if we are wrong about Wonder Woman 1984. We are not. Tell us.
I wish we were, because oh man.
Tell us other things, et cetera, et cetera. Or if you didn't want to, send us an email, you could give us a call
at 862-21-PEACE.
Yeah, leave us a voicemail. We'll put it on the show because we're those kinds of people. And if you like the show, please rate and review us by going to ratethispodcast.com/spoilerpiece. And if you really, really like the show, please consider joining our Patreon. This week, our exclusive audio segment is The Muppet Christmas Carol. That is the result of a poll that you patrons voted on. So thank you very much for doing that. And while we're here, we'd like to thank our patrons. Please take it away.
We want to give a huge thank you to Bill Scahan, Bob Chipman, Charles Nash, Chris Wilkinson, Davida Margolin, Deirdre Crimmins, Elisa, Christopher Jensen, Max Coville, Mike Lord of the Sith, Rory Glynn, Sean Pensionar, Sean Harris, Shelley M. McCaskill, Shona Glasgow, and Zach Pigeon. Thank you so much, patrons.
Thanks,
we said this on the Patreon segment, and we're going to say it again on the main show. I'm going to say it again. We love doing this show, and we are so grateful to all of our patrons, and we're so grateful to all of our listeners for tuning in.
We are.
We love doing this, and we hope you love listening, so thank you.
Yeah, thanks, patrons. And hey, that's the end of the show. So I'm Dave Riedel. I write sometimes for Salt Lake City Weekly. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association. I don't remember what my best movie of the year was, but we'll talk about that next week. And you can follow me on the social medias as Dave Sees Movies at Twitter, Letterboxd, and Instagram.
My name is Evan Crean. I'm co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and co-author of your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living. You can follow me on Twitter and on Letterboxd as Real Recon.
And my name is Megan Kearns. I'm a contributor to Edge Media Network. I, too, am a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association. And you can follow me on Twitter at OpinionSWorld and on Instagram and Letterboxd at TheOpinionS.
And we will see you next week, patrons. Have a great holiday.
And listeners.
And listeners. I meant, yeah, all you listeners are great, not just the ones who pay us. I'm sorry.
Thank you, everybody. We hope you all have happy holidays.
See you later.